Back in the communist times in Poland, the political system in Poland was called in communist newspeak people's democracy. So there was a joke back in the day, what is the difference between democracy and people's democracy? And the answer roughly the same as between a chair and an electric chair. So I think that the same applies to the difference between liberal and illiberal democracy. Because the term illiberal democracy is getting more and more popular, and it was first popularized by Fareed Zakaria in his Foreign Affairs piece, The Rise of Illiberal Democracy. He wrote that from Peru to Palestinian Authority, from Sierra Leone to Slovakia, we see the rise of disturbing phenomenon, illiberal democracy. And Zakaria's piece made a to my mind, very important distinction between democracy and liberalism. Democracy, in this view, and I think that's a proper view, is a mechanism of electing political leaders. That's the way you get your authority. You just go and elect them. But to say that the state is democratic doesn't say very much about how it is actually run. It just says how you get your politicians, how you get your authorities elected. So then the liberal component kicks in. And liberal, by contrast, is about the norms, practices that shape political life. James talked about it quite a lot. So a liberal state is one in which individual rights are protected by the rule of law, not only against the abuses of a tyrant, but also against the abuses of democratic majorities. According to Zakaria, these two components, liberalism and democracy, are becoming more and more disengaged from one another, and he saw that as a real threat. Now let's jump 17 years into the future. It's the year 2014, and we are not in the United States, but in Romania. And in Romania, we are joined by Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who just gave a famous speech on illiberal democracy, in which he not only said that illiberal democracy is not a threat, he said that that is actually the kind of state he wants to build in Hungary. And what he said, what is happening today in Hungary can be interpreted as an attempt of the respective political leadership to harmonize relationship between the interests of individuals and achievements of the country, the nation. Meaning that Hungarian nation is not as simple as sum of individuals, but a community that needs to be organized, strengthened, and developed. And in this sense, the new state that we are building is an illiberal state, a non-liberal state. So you see, look what he's doing here. He's saying that respecting individual rights and goals makes it difficult or maybe even impossible to advance national interests. Furthermore, what he says, when those two collide, individual interests and national interests take precedence. And now you need to ask yourself a question. Who defines national interests? And obviously, national interests usually are defined by the parliamentary majority, in this case, Mr. Orban and his party. Thus, what I would like to say, without a healthy liberal component, democracy can easily turn into tyranny of majority, or rather, given that the ruling parties hardly ever get the actual majority of the votes, it's the tyranny of the best organized minority. So when somebody tells you, and there are many people apart from Orban doing so, because let me just point out to one fact that everybody now is a Democrat. Vladimir Putin, perfectly democratic. That's what he says about himself. Orban, Erdogan, they never say they are undemocratic, but quite often they say they are just different kind of Democrats, illiberal Democrats. They just don't want the liberal part of democracy. What I'm trying to say is that there is no democracy without this liberal part, or at least it cannot last very long. But then you can ask, does it have to be this way, that democracy without liberalism must turn into some form of authoritarianism? And let me get back to this joke I said at the beginning about the electric chair. Well, you can sit on an electric chair and maybe even be quite comfortable on it. But the problem is, you never really know when somebody flicks the switch on.